Becomes like a fleeting memory. Whatever you grab just turns to dust. Like eye contact with a stranger in a crowded room is a dream begging to be real. The passing note of a song, the glimmer of the shifting sea. I think you saw it,
Cheers. Awesome.
To the shores.
To the shores. I love it. Yeah, I'm actually somewhat optimistic right now.
I know the levity in your face is bringing me some calm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's more. It's like, whenever anything first, from COVID to the stuff with Floyd and everything we've kind of gone through over the last like 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. It's kind of sometimes you need time and space to kind of bring some perspective. Yeah. And it's like when you're in the middle of something, sometimes it's really hard to gain a ground of kind of like what is happening. And I'm very optimistic over the next couple of months of being able to kind of see where we are. As we're starting to see, there's a lot of questions right now with COVID numbers rising, yet the death toll is percentage-wise going down. Right. What does that mean? We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. I'm not making any statements on that, but it's just more of like, I feel like over the next couple of months we're going to better see where we are and hopefully make some more and more informed decisions on stuff. And I also feel that as a business too, like, coming to the end of a lot of the PPP stuff and EIDL.
Those were the government programs.
Yeah, government programs. That's starting to kind of come to an end. We've been working on a lot of stuff, just working, my team and I have been working on just our asses off on a lot of stuff just to try to keep us going. And, but all those things are starting to get like into the pipeline. You know? So that's really exciting. We do have a lot of work ahead of us. I think there's a lot of work and it's not like it's going to be easy. Yeah. But I don't know, the more people I talk to and the people we listen to also, I feel like there's a lot of clarity coming around a lot of these issues and ideas. And but that's part of it is like is being able to deal with the unknowns, but also to take into consideration the things that we do know. And I feel, and again, I don't think this is something that is widespread right now. But I feel like it's like whenever August comes, Allison always gets mad at me because I go, "Oh, the heat is broken." She's like, "No, it's still fucking hot."
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, "Yeah, but
we've reached a point."
Yeah, we've reached and I don't think we've really reached the point yet. Yeah. But again, it's like, come August, there's this place that, in Austin, Texas, that you're like, okay, we know at this point it's going to start kind of decreasing, yeah, it's still in the hundreds and 90s and all that stuff. Right. Yeah.
I don't know that I feel quite as positive as you do, but I noticed something, I think it was either yesterday or today on Twitter. I've become an avid Twitter reader over the last several months. Well, I just find that it's a very toxic place. It's a very negative place. Mm-hmm. I actually think, I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast, but I made an observation to you a while back. I think it was when the COVID stuff started. Maybe that's when I started reading Twitter, because I was just like desperate for information, because we're in this cloud of confusion. And I had made an observation to you that like, you go read, I think I had read one of Mayor Adler's statements, and he tweeted it, and all the responses were like hyper negative, very like toxic, like screw you, Adler, get out of office, we hate you, you're a piece of shit. Like it was all really negative. He posted the same, actually a picture of the tweet to his Instagram, and all the comments were very positive. Thank you for your strong leadership. We're going to get through this. And I'm generally more of an Instagram person, and maybe that's part of the reason is that Instagram does tend to be a pretty positive place. Twitter's a pretty negative place. But Twitter does feed you a lot of information very quickly in real time. Mm-hmm. And so I've been reading it a lot, and I noticed a shift in the tone. So I don't know if it's worth giving a specific example, but I just noticed that people had been very sincerely and seriously going after ideas, taking these ideas seriously, trying to understand them, even ones that seemed just wildly off base. And then I noticed that there was a shift where people kind of stopped taking some things seriously and just started making fun of it. And there was this, it's still in a nasty way, like making fun of things in kind of a gross way, but that shift, that break from like the taking of something serious, as serious, into being able to make fun of it. And I think that's actually like a really natural progression for understanding and accepting and mainstreaming ideas. Is first they seem very confusing, and then the confusion starts to break, but the clarity isn't there yet. And so you sort of poke fun of it, you make fun of it. I mean, I think we see the same progression in like teenagers that start to like each other and date. It's like at first they just won't even talk to each other, and then they start poking fun of each other, and then they actually start to get to know each other. So that I took that as a good sign.
Oh, that's interesting. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl's too. Like, when you first went to the concentration camp, and how people encounter that, and then they kind of at some point kind of form a little bit of like dark humor, and it kind of helps you cope with the world around you, and it's like you need to kind of have a little bit of levity in how you encounter the world, because it is really a difficult place.
It's true. And I don't even think it's like levity is something that like gets put across the aisle from the difficulty of the world. It's not like we use it as a way to cope with the difficulty of the world. I think we actually use it as a way to understand the difficulty of the world. Yeah. I mean, satire is a very important device for understanding, to be able to characterize something, to caricature it. Yeah. It's really it's an important part of what is the word? I don't know. Psychologically coming to terms with things.
No, it makes sense. I mean, like I think even like with the really great comedians, you know, it's like they are able to help us laugh at ourselves, as well as a lot of things that are uncomfortable to laugh at. But it kind of brings things to the surface and in an uncomfortable way, but it's sort of like, oh.
I think they tend to be at the forefront of our cultural understanding of issues, because they're able to show them to us in a way that we can't look at directly. Yeah. We have to see it through the lens of something else we already understand. Often something else we already understand to be absurd, to see the absurd parts of this thing we don't want to look at. And that gives us some framework to start investigating what's worth investigating.
Totally. And it's like, if you're a good comedian, then nobody leaves the place without having been offended. It's like great comedians basically like kind of like everybody leaves with something like they're like, oh yeah, well, that's kind of true about me, it's like, and I think that's something great. I think Chappelle does a great job of that, and Rogan, and but then you have comics like Jim Gaffigan, where he just kind of like, everyone just kind of like, it's kind of a feel good, it's like you kind of get to escape of the reality of the world, a little bit through him. And so he kind of provides, I think, a different type of comedy. I don't know how to qualify that. And I think I've heard people talk about it a lot more eloquently than I can. Yeah. But he's kind of like, I mean, because he does make fun, because he has 5 kids, which I identify with. And well, anybody with big families, 3, 4, 5, crazy. And eating is his thing. So I don't know. He's just kind of really a fun person to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you were talking earlier about the confusion of all of these things, and like maybe we're coming through some of it. Yeah. I had run across this article. I wanted to read you a quote from it. It was written by Jeremy Philosoph. He published it on the website newdiscourses.com. And just it's a really good article, but what the article's about is irrelevant. This quote, though, at the end was, "We as a populace are overreacting in haste to highly interpretive narratives around circumstances that we do not fully understand and seem not to want to fully understand. It is crucial we take a stand for setting the records straight." And that hit me like one of the clearest diagnoses of what I see when I look around, because there's so many things to talk about.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty easy to sort of characterize the last couple of months or name it to say, since George Floyd. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of, everybody understands all the things we've been dealing with, but there's so many things. So many issues, so many incidents. And it does seem to me like that quote seemed to nail the things that all of these things have in common.
Yeah.
Is that we are dealing with highly interpretive narratives surrounding circumstances that we don't fully understand and we don't seem to want to. Mm. And I also think that that's understandable.
Yeah.
Like we don't want to understand them. We just want to feel what we're feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's probably important.
Yeah.
But I also think we will move into a place of understanding. It just takes, to your point earlier, it just takes time. Mm-hmm. It takes time.
Well, I think that's our thing too. Like we're talking about naming, which is interesting. So, whenever we say, COVID-19, it's like there's this whole flood of emotions and how you personally experienced that. It's like whether you're a business person, whether now you have to work at home, whether you lost your job,
lost a family
member. Yeah, exactly. Or you're in poor health, and so you have a real concern because people in poor health have a higher risk of mortality or of death, and so just that name, when you say that, it carries so many different narratives with it, and it's hard to say what that is for each individual. Like I've seen where people are just so deathly afraid of it, and other people are a little bit, the whole spectrum all the way to like, oh, this is no big deal, it's like the flu or something like that. It's like, so you have this whole spectrum of how people are experiencing that idea, or just in other outside of just actual disease, COVID-19. It's like, so I find it fascinating. Or even like with George Floyd, it's like that's a thing that happened, and like what that means to you has a whole huge breadth of things. It's like you kind of have like where I feel like most people are is like, wow, that was a really horrible situation, but from that horrible situation, just like it just spans off and spider webs into so many different things. So it's fascinating to kind of learn. I feel like over the last month or two is like, or month and a half, I guess it is, like what that has meant to different people, and what that has also drawn up for them in their own experience. Right. Whether good or bad, it's like there's a whole spectrum of things there. So
yeah.
But it's funny like how something like that can just, because at first it's like, I think when something first happens, it's like there's sort of a shared narrative, like I feel like what I heard across the aisle was just like how horrible the situation that was, but then as that narrative sort of like opened up and then people were expressing that in different ways, it started to kind of like, you started seeing the complexities around more the effects or what that had kind of like drawn people, or the things that had drawn to people's consciousness or forefront,
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't want to go too far on this, but like, I was just thinking about like when I first met, Matt, it was like, when I first met you, it was a very simplistic idea of who Matt was or is. And then as I got to know him and we had experiences and our kids got to know each other and you knew my wife, and it was like that the complexity of that relationship started to grow. And so like, and my understanding of Matt was tied through a lot of different parts and pieces and stuff. So I think that's why I'm also optimistic in a general sense, is because the complexity is starting to reveal itself.
Yeah. Well, I think that when something like the George Floyd incident occurs, that affects every human in the same base way. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the same, maybe with 9/11. It's like we all felt this base level in the pit of our stomach. How could that have happened? Absolute disgust. It unites us, and that national unity around a feeling immediately becomes sort of gas on a fire, and we don't quite know what to feed that fire immediately, but we know it needs to be there. And so the complexity starts to multiply exponentially. And, you know, it's like, everything becomes about that. And George Floyd becomes the symbol of it in our minds, and the name of it. And after a while, you start to figure out that the complexity that has built up underneath that symbol has outgrown the original symbol itself. And so I think we can use that symbol appropriately, but at some point we've got to start saying, okay, that symbol really only applies to this part, and these other parts now need their own names. We've got to be able to look at these things separately with more
rigor.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's been possible to do that quite yet. No. Which is honestly why I think, you know, a lot of the sort of policy decisions that are being made are being made in haste and mostly falling flat. You know, because they're trying to solve a problem that hasn't been very well defined yet. Yeah. At least it's still wrapped up in so many other things. We haven't been able to look at things quite clearly yet. But I think, you know, trying to bring that into this idea of naming. I mean, naming is really, really important. And it carries value because it is symbolic. And at certain times we have to decide what no longer fits under that name. Yeah.
Well, I mean, also it's fascinating to see, like, you know, like you gave the 9/11 example, you know, it's like through that example, like policemen and firemen and first responders were our heroes. I mean, it's like these people like had no concern for their life, and they were going into fires and into like horrible dust and all kinds of stuff, trying to help and do good things, you know. And, you know, I think that's the hard thing about with this is, like, you know, you kind of see there's some things that are being demonized, like, you know, and again, I feel like this is just some people using this instance in a more negative way, you know, like all cops are bastards, you know. It's like, man, it's not true. It's like most cops, most of the things that are said against, like, reported against cops are from other cops, you know. It's like they're one of the ones that report, and so it's like, you know, cops are also like, I know quite a few cops, and it's like they want things to be good, you know. It's like they don't want this corruption and stuff like that. It's like they didn't sign on for that, and, you know, to put a percentage on that, I couldn't really do. But
well, I mean, I think this is what I'm trying to get at, is that when you have a uniting narrative or a uniting incident, the natural response is to cast a narrative that consumes that everything in the world can fit into, because we're all united, and so everything has to make sense in the same way. And so we make these broad, sweeping declarations. Maybe the 9/11 is a good comparison, because in 9/11, all cops were heroes. It's like, yeah, I can get behind that. Yeah. Because they did a really good thing.
Right now with COVID is like all of our nursing and stuff like that, they're all heroes, you know, which is really cool.
Well, but like in 9/11, you know, the stories we didn't hear quite so much, but I guarantee you occurred, is that there were cops that turned and ran away because some people are cowards. Yeah. So no, not all cops are heroes. And it's the same here. But we're doing the same thing because we are united around something. And in this case, a sweeping declaration was made, and it came out of this broad classification within the early throes of trying to describe what this symbol stood for. And all cops are bastards is absolutely not true. And I think a lot of people clearly support that statement. I have a much harder time supporting that statement than I would have supporting all cops are heroes. Just factually, it's not true.
Well, I think too is it's also how you approach something too. Is I was always taught to look for the best in people until they prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And so if I meet somebody the first time, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that was something that was ingrained in me.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the ideals of this country. Yes, actually. We were talking about that last week. I think. How did we say it? That every person you deal with, you're dealing with a prototype of a sovereign being. Not dealing with that person directly and who they are. You're dealing with who they could be.
Yeah. Again, it's a generous interpretation. Even in our conversation right now, we're talking about it's funny, even saying not all cops are bad. It's I can see how that can be interpreted as oh, well, you're part of the blue crew or something like that. It's I'm tired of those sort of overarching statements that try to put you into categories where you can't have a nuanced position of saying hey, you know what? Not all cops are bad.
Well, this is the problem with terms that become semantically overloaded. Is that they become within this messy, ill-described narrative. Symbols become placeholders for things, for way too many things at once.
Yeah.
It's I feel like the Black Lives Matter movement is a great example of this. Because when someone says to you, Black Lives Matter, are you to take that as the sentiment, as the movement, or as the organization? Because those are three very, very different things.
And there's probably 3 or 4 more elements to that too.
Right.
But yeah, let's just keep with that.
Right. And in order to sort of so if you say, I don't agree all cops are bastards, you fall on a certain side of this symbol, which is already semantically overloaded. And I think it takes time, and maybe this sort of comedy and levity is something that allows us to start to do that. So if there's a comedian can sort of make a good joke that makes us see that that there is truth in the statement.
Yeah.
There's valid feeling in the statement, but it's also not absolutely true. And to separate that, then we can start to say, oh, there's actually 2 things here that we're dealing with. It's not just 1, it's 2. And then maybe it's not 2, maybe it's 5. And we can start to separate those out and start to have a more sophisticated, nuanced conversation about those things.
Yeah.
But as long as we're dealing with these symbols that are very widely defined, it's very difficult. And I think it's you end up having to tiptoe around things because I didn't even want to say the words Black Lives Matter earlier because as soon as I say it and you hear me, you evaluate the tone of my voice, and you make a judgment about me, about where I fall on 18 different issues.
Yeah.
And that's not a productive way to have a conversation.
Yeah. It's not very generous in a conversation to make those judgments, especially it should be followed by a question or something.
Yeah. And I guess since we're here, I'll just say that Black Lives Matter, period. That statement is true. And I don't know anybody who disagrees.
Yeah.
The movement itself, I think, has so many wonderful things that are a part of it. It's definitely gotten out of control in some places for reasons that I don't understand. But the organization is something I absolutely cannot get behind.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
It doesn't seem confusing to me. It seems like they have co-opted this phrase that everybody agrees with in order to sneak some other agenda in. Yeah. And when I read the agenda, I don't agree with any of it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's I don't even feel like we're at a place yet where people are ready to separate.
Yeah.
But maybe I was, so I just did.
Yeah, you just did. Well, I think that's the thing. I think we're moving into nuance more. I don't think we're there yet, but I think that is something that will be needed and will be coming. And I'm already starting to see a lot more people kind of look at things a little bit more broadly, a little bit more generously. And I think that it's not going to be quick, you know. Because there's a lot of things that we really, in order to really solve problems, it's like we do have to get into, Martin Luther King said, it's like you got to gather your facts first, and negotiate, and then do self-purification, and then action. And I think he really, I think that's why.
Can you pull up those 4 steps? I feel like we didn't get to that last time.
Yeah, that was basically it. But
wasn't there a 4th?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was action.
But gather the facts, self-purification,
negotiation,
action.
Yeah. So here it is: collection of the facts to determine whether injustices are alive, negotiation, self-purification, direct action. And these are really, it's like really, you have to gather the facts and say, okay, what are the facts here? And it's a very unemotional and detached way of, but it's also, it's kind of a sobering way to look at a very complex situation. And I like the part of negotiation because I think there's a part where through negotiation, you start to test out those facts.
Yeah.
So that sort of like disembodied aspect and unemotional part, you start to engage in it with other people in this negotiation, which the emotional part does come into that, but it also tries it as if like in fire to see whether those things are actually true, and someone's going to challenge you on that, and maybe passionately challenging you on that. And I think that's why his 3rd step of self-purification is so valuable. It's like, where am I in this? And something that for him specifically was, does this come from love? Like that was a huge part of him, is like, am I acting in love? Do I love my enemy? If I view this person as my enemy, am I showing this person, respect and love? I think that's why he was such a proponent of the nonviolent movement, and how hard it was. Can you go into this in such a way that you're going to change people's minds, but harm might be caused to you, but you're not going to retaliate, or revenge or whatever it might be. And then you have direct action that's so powerful because you're centered in that aspect of love and not viewing your enemy as somebody you hate or you want to have revenge on or you want to kill or defeat. And that's the other thing too, is like he talks about like not defeating. It says, do not seek to humiliate or defeat, but to win friendship and understanding. Like that was a purpose of his, is not to defeat somebody or humiliate them. And again, I think that's why that was such a powerful movement. He unified people, and he unified people across religious, racial, ideological. Yeah. It's like, so I feel like you see the power of that. And I think when he went to India and met, I think it was Gandhi's son or grandson, I forget what it was, and he was just so moved by what Gandhi had accomplished that I feel like it kind of solidified that nonviolent aspect and the unifying aspect, and not seeing your enemy as someone to be hated.
Why are we not seeing more of that now? I see very little narrative around unity.
I think we're still defining it. I think we're still in the part of defining and understanding the nuance. And it's so easy to turn everything into a unidimensional problem. You think of Maya Angelou's white fragility. She brings
Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah. She really makes this such a simple problem. It's like, you're white, you're racist, and there's nothing you can do about it. The end. If you deny that, it's a Kafka trap.
It's proof.
It's proof. Yeah, it's proof that you are. If you deny it, if you accept
but
it, it's proof that it is.
My question though is like, why are we embracing that? Why as a culture is that the number one best-selling book? Because it seems so clear to me that message is divisive. And whether it's true or not, that all white people are racist. It's such an absurd statement that I don't even want to argue it.
Yeah, it's not worth getting into.
But even if that were true, the message leaves no hope.
No.
And a message without hope can only be divisive and deadly. And so, like, why? Why are we in this divisive place? Like, where is the message of unity? Where is the message that actually defines even what success would look like here?
I think it's easy. Like, simple messages are so easy to follow. You know, I think that's why, like, fundamentalism, you know, whether you're talking about Christian fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalism, you know, you take that all across the board in all sorts of areas, it's so much easier because you adhere to these tenets to the T, and you spend your life trying to attain to those tenets. It's so simple because there's not a lot of nuance, there's not a lot of gray, but when you're talking about a relationship, it's like there's so much nuance, you know? And it's like you think you see somebody a certain way. Like, I mean, even being married, I just had my anniversary last week, you know, or this week. It's like Alice and I just, even on our anniversary night, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I've been married to you 18 years and I still don't know you.
Yeah.
You know, that's fucked up. I mean, I know her, but I think I just keep seeing new things about her that are just, there's nuances that even after 18 years, I don't even have. Yeah. And it's messy and it's hard.
Yeah. It's not like you have her figured out because it's not like she's or any person is a static
totally
individual. It's like, you can't press pause on a person and then like be able to capture all of who they are and be like, done, I got them, you know, it's like, because the next second something else happens. And, this reminds me of this statement. So after my divorce and the trial that we had to go to, was mandated by the judge. We both were to take a co-parenting class. It's actually pretty cool because the city of Austin offers this class for free. This man, I can't remember his name now, he felt like co-parenting after divorce was a huge problem in the community. So he just like started this class and went to the courthouse and started talking to the judges and just said, I'm going to teach this class for free. You need to start sending people to me.
So cool. And
so they did. And he was great. He said something that has changed my life in a lot of ways. But he said, your success in this situation, and I guess I will say, we did not take this class together. We took the class, my ex and I, on different nights. And so I was in a room with a bunch of people who also were not with their exes. So I thought that was a really healthy way to handle, getting two people to take something after they've already legally separated. But anyway, he said, your success in this relationship depends on your belief in their belief in you. And it took me so long to make sense of that because it's like it's like a recursive thought. It's like what I believe about you, Michael, is largely based upon what I believe you believe about me.
Oh yeah, totally.
And so I'm responding, I'm interacting almost not so much with you, but with what I think you believe, specifically about me.
Yeah.
And so in my relationship with my ex, that helped me because I realized that I had control over the things that felt like they were out of control by working on what I believed they believed. And if I could change what I believed that they believed, then all of a sudden I'm dealing with a different person.
Yeah.
And you were talking earlier about the what is the verse that we deal not with, we war not against flesh and blood.
Yeah. It's like Ephesians 6:12 or something like that.
You know, I always growing up heard that verse and somewhat dismissed it because the conclusion is like, well, what are we warring against? Angels and demons? Like, come on. But I really think it's true. And it's not that it's angels and demons. I mean, maybe it's fine to conceptualize it that way. But, I think Peterson reframed that idea directly by saying, it's not clear whether or not people have ideas or ideas have people.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing as saying, what I believe that you believe fundamentally changes the way that I behave.
Yeah.
So it's not dealing with you directly, it's dealing with what I think you believe. And when we're dealing with complex people and complex situations, complex world events, complex belief systems, we assign, potentially semantically overloaded symbols to these things. And we really are dealing with those more than we're dealing with the people.
Yeah.
And the second that we find a trigger that puts some, like a statement, I don't think all cops are bastards. And the person's like, oh, so you're a part of this symbol. It's like, all of a sudden you're not dealing with me. You're dealing with the symbol and what all that represents and everyone else, that falls under that. And it's like now, and this is the whole reason why it's so morally wrong to judge the individual by the attributes of the group. In some ways it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
For the reasons I think that I just outlined, but I think we've hopefully learned that lesson, that is like making decisions on an individual based upon the group that they seemingly belong to, especially when it comes to moral judgment, is a very dangerous road.
Yeah. Especially when you're dealing with the complexities of people, it's like you can hold a lot of different viewpoints. It's like it doesn't have to necessarily fall into all the category of that, whatever that person might put you in or define you as. It's like I think it's a hard thing to deal with and work, because I think it's also helpful to be able to have categories and things that you put people in, but it needs to be very loosely done. Like, okay, most people I know that kind of think that way usually fit in this place, but that should be followed by a question of like, hey, well, what about this? And so then it defines and nuances it. And then you can kind of like, I find myself all the time, like creating and defining new categories to kind of like judge and work my way through. But it's not like, it doesn't become narrow or actually becomes broader. It's like, as I get older, it's like, when we were growing up, I remember it was like, you either were a UT fan or an OU fan. Like you fit in those two categories.
Period. Every single person.
Exactly. Yeah. And then like,
and if somebody like doesn't even watch football, you're like, oh, well, you're a UT fan.
Yeah, exactly. Like you had to be put in one of those two categories. And then, but as you grow older, it's like, oh, wow, you actually like the Florida Gators. Well, that's kind of weird. Like that's like one person out of like, in Amarillo, Texas.
Must be the only one.
Yeah, true. So I think the complexity starts as you get older, you have to start dealing with complexity.
Yeah. You have to revisit those categories that have served you very well.
Yeah. Because it's very infantile, to have small categories.
That's so interesting. That is the way that we grow up, right? Like when you're an infant, there are two categories. There is safe and unsafe.
Yeah, totally.
Known and unknown. And known starts with your mother.
Yeah.
And then,
then this other guy.
It's like, I don't know what to think about him. Yeah. It's like, we've had babies. We know that our babies don't like us all that much for quite some time.
Totally.
Then they kind of like become a little complacent. Like, I guess you can hold me as long as I'm like not hungry or hot or like have a dirty diaper.
Totally.
Yeah. And then it's not till like 5 or 6 that all of a sudden they're like, wait, I think I kind of like you.
No, I would have to say with every one of my kids, obviously it was not like definitively, but by 4, it's like, actually it was like, I kind of went up to number 2, from like number 4 or 5. But
you
like,
upped your game.
I got up to like number 2. Like mom was always number 1.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was just like, it was really interesting. Like 4 to 5 was like that sort of, it seemed pretty, in my mind anyways, definitive. So.
Yeah. There's a great, actually I hesitate to bring it up because I don't know that I can recall it well enough to make the point well, but there's a great, in the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by, was it Pirsig? He talks about like when you're trying to understand your life, it's almost as if you have this like box of sand, and of all the complexity in life, all of it's there, and you kind of start pushing the sand into little piles here and there to make sense of things. Well, these things go over here, these things go over here. Sometimes you'll deconstruct each one and look at every grain and be like, so well, this one actually belongs over here. and this is the way that we make sense. This is an analogy he's making for the way that we make sense of the world. And he said, every once in a while, you read a great author, or have a conversation with somebody, or even see a piece of art, or hear a song, and it's as if somebody takes us. I think he uses the word scalpel, or maybe stick or something, and they come and they just sort of make a couple quick slashes in your piles of sand, and your first thought is, you ruined everything. And then all of a sudden you look at it and you were like, oh, I see everything completely different now.
Yeah.
I didn't imagine these categories, or these subdivisions of categories, or these groupings of things before. And you see the world totally differently.
Totally.
And I think that I would imagine that we've all experienced that to some extent in our life. We've read something, or had some conversation, or some experience where all of a sudden we walk away and we're like, everything seems different.
Yeah, there's definitely those characters, even through, that have those huge impacts, even like good literature and stuff like that you were talking about. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many. I mean, I think Peterson like really had a huge impact on a lot of people. I mean, whether you agree with him or not, it's like it was really interesting to see him as a cultural phenomenal.
Phenomenal. You said that like with so much hoity-toity something. I don't know what it was.
That's awesome. Phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Oh, baby. So I feel like that cook in the Muppets.
Oh yeah, that was a good character.
But after I was making that really profound point, that was good.
I don't remember the point you were making there. Oh well.
But it was a phenomenon. Oh, Peterson is a phenomenon. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, I think, Obama, like just his, like as a symbol was a huge symbol in 2008. I think that was huge. Václav Havel for the Czech Republic and communism, and what was Czech Republic, and then Czechoslovakia, then Czech Republic. But as a symbol, but he wasn't appreciated at first. It wasn't until he was close to death or died that people really understood the symbol, and which is also really sad. It seems like a lot of times we don't really understand the symbols until that symbol dies. Like I kind of wonder like how much impact MLK being shot in that symbol became so much more powerful. I don't know. I've been studying him recently and more, but that'd be one thing I'd be curious of. It seemed like he had a huge impact in his life, but I don't think as many symbols really experience that. Like I think of Jesus too, like as a symbol. It's like it was after his death that it was like it just spread across the Roman world.
Yeah.
I mean, even Gandhi, like, I mean, how he affected, MLK too. I mean, it was just like, it's like that symbol of Gandhi kind of projected itself into the future.
Were they contemporaries? Was Gandhi alive in the 60s?
I don't remember whenever he died. He seemed like earlier? He was, golly. I think he might have died in the 40s or 50s.
Sounds more right.
Yeah. I got Google right here, so I'll do it.
Well, I mean, that at some level makes sense because a symbol is only recognized as a symbol when it is sort of
1948 is when he died.
1948. Once a symbol can, in some ways, not be added to, then it is seen as a symbol, at least culturally.
Well, then you go back to the idea of naming too. It's like what Gandhi did in his lifetime was really powerful. But then after he left this world, when he died, it's like that symbol continued to grow, and the meaning of that symbol continued to grow. In fact, it's interesting to see, like, even like how the symbol of Gandhi even like kind of incorporated itself into MLK too,
Yeah.
Sort of like our forefathers and foremothers, how they like live on through us and our actions too.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's the life-giving ones. It's like, because we think of like a Genghis Khan or a Hitler, it's like the death and destruction that they left in their path, It's like, that's a symbol that nobody really wants to claim, or produces life.
But it's also important in some level to leave it around, that it remains symbolic, so that we can recognize when we're bumping up against it.
Totally. Which gets to another point of how then misusing symbols or too broadly, it's like I hear a lot of talk about how many different types of people are Nazis. It's like, that's just not healthy. No, that is a really, really abuse of that terminology.
Abuse not because it's unfair to the individuals that are being labeled that way. Although in some cases certainly it may be, but that's not what I think. That's not what you mean by when you say it's an abuse of it. It's an abuse of it because we need it to retain its full power, so we know that it's over there.
Yeah.
So we know what to avoid. And once we start applying it in places where it doesn't apply, then we water that down and we forget to avoid that.
Yeah, there's so many fantasy novels and stuff like that have that same idea as whether it be Saruman or Voldemort or something like that. It's like there's these names that kind of get forgotten or almost that they become mythology or watered down to where people don't really use that mythology in a way that is helpful in like understanding how bad it could actually be, when there are those symbols that have come through history that have done those things, I mean, even like in the United States, it's like, slavery and, what all that, the impact it has had on the United States, and then also our journey through that, it's like, there's this sort of like, overcoming in Black America. And there's a lot of like great people that talk about this a lot better than I can, but it was just like really profound. And so there's that symbol of like overcoming, but then also, the atrocities that did happen, but it's a symbol that, again, but we need to have those around to remind us, it's like, never getting rid of the Auschwitz. We need to have those symbols to remind us of the capability that we can actually do to other people.
Yeah.
No matter what your religion is, whether it's your skin color is, it doesn't matter. It's like we are capable of that as a species.
Right.
Yeah, Bret made this great comment. It's like, early on our evolution, it's like we were very family oriented. It's like anything outside of family were the enemy, And at some point, we started to learn to cooperate into larger groups, and benefit each other, and so we started to expand our definition of who is the enemy,
Yeah.
and just how healthy it is for us to continue to expand that definition and to not restrict that definition to white or black or rich or poor. It's like, I think, what was his name? He got in a lot of shit this last week. I won't go into that, but also Viktor Frankl puts it in the same way. Who wrote Man's Search for Meaning is like, there's good people and there's bad people. It's like, I'm on the side of good people.
Yeah, he said...
that might be too binary, but...
well, no, he said it in a different way, I think, which is worth clarifying, because he said there's only two races of people. Decent and undecent.
Oh, gotcha.
And his observation was that there is overlap in every group. So the most brutal abusers in the concentration camps were the Jews who were imprisoned there, who were given special status by the SS. So it's like, it's not even Jew versus German Aryan or SS versus Captor. The line of decent versus indecent doesn't care about what group you're in.
Yeah.
And I think he said, I choose decent.
Yeah.
I want to be a decent man.
Totally. And again, I think that's why, something with our Constitution that's so amazing is like, seeing the individual as a divine being, whether you believe in that, but the idea is that there's something unique and special about the individual, that holds something that is truly set apart. And so if we can see each other that way, whether we agree with each other or not, I feel like there's better chance of unity when we give somebody that dignity,
Right.
And we sort of are generous to somebody. And that's our first default mode, is not that all cops are bastards, are that, hey, I know what's inside me. It's the same thing that's inside you, and it's like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you genuinely want what's best.
Yeah.
With the understanding, again, you can't be naive, and that there are people that do not want that. And for many, many reasons, and too many to go into right now, but I feel like we have to start from that standpoint, the generous standpoint of, I believe that there is good in you.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other way to go. I mean, the other way of like expecting or interpreting somebody, the worst of somebody, is probably, it just leads to disaster.
Yeah.
To genocide, if you want to go all the way that way,
Or even worse, I mean, making moral judgments about people based upon immutable properties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So good. Well, what should we like? How should we kind of like wrap this up? Yeah, we've kind of like, I don't know, we kind of jumped into it pretty good. I'm excited about this. Again, there's a lot of nuance in what we're saying, and we're also kind of skirting the lines in a lot of areas here. But I feel like that's something we want to do.
I'm glad you're admitting that we're skirting the lines. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there's a lot here that we're careful to talk about or not talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe actually for a lot of the reasons we outlined in this conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just worth remembering that humans are very, very complex.
Mm-hmm.
And conversations are really complex.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, I think we did want to recommend people
that's right.
that video. So Bret Weinstein has a video out called Bret Weinstein DarkHorse podcast Roundtable discussion.
We'll put it in the notes.
I think we won't talk too much about what that conversation was. I think I'll just say that if you want an example of how to have a highly respectful, highly productive conversation between a large group of people who don't agree, I've never seen a better example of that.
It was a great example. The nuance that they were allowing as well as challenging each other on was impressive. Like, I just get chills just thinking about it.
When you think about like any cable news network show where you've got 5 people sitting, everyone's talking over one another. You can't hardly understand what anybody's saying because they're all talking at the same time. None of that here.
Yeah, so respectful.
And
intelligent. And, wow, God, I love it.
And to that point, I mean, the point I was making is like conversations are really complicated. They're difficult to have, especially when you're talking about really important things.
Totally.
And to see people have a conversation in such an impressive way like that was very encouraging to me.
Yeah.
So I feel a lot of hope in that. I feel a lot of hope that maybe there is a shift happening, and maybe we are moving into making some more sense of things. And I hope that we can remember that I think the presupposition should, I hope, be that whoever you are talking to, that is a good person. Until they prove otherwise.
Yeah.
And give them that benefit of the doubt. And in places where you don't know or understand, interrogate your understanding. Interrogate what you believe that they believe before you decide that they are no longer good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember we are all brothers and sisters. I mean, I feel like that's a very helpful way to look at it.
Yeah.
And we're also not advocating naivety. So it's something that is, it's like we do have to make judgments, but just I think it's important to do it very lightly.
Yeah.
And, And if you're not ready for something, it's okay. That's like, acknowledge that, you know, it's like, hey, I'm not ready for that conversation right now. And
for that to be okay.
And that to be okay. And even to tell somebody, it's like, hey, I don't think I can go there right now because I don't know really where I am at in that space.
Yeah.
And we need to allow that for people to, I think that's one thing in a lot of what's happening right now is people are requiring people to come into a certain agreement with, and they might not be ready for that, you know, or they might not agree with you, but they need to have some space to be able to think that through and we need to allow people to do that.
Yeah.
And the shaming, like, you know, MOK, I just go back to him, you know, it's like shaming people is not helpful or healthy. Bottom line, there's just no way around it. Winning friendship and loving people and allowing people their process and challenging people. And I think that's a really huge thing to learn, is how to challenge people without demeaning them and causing more harm.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I'm really excited about. I think that's why we also love this podcast and going out into those spaces where, like we're talking about, like dancing on the knife's edge of our understanding.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So
it's challenging, but I feel myself grow through it.
Totally.
And what better feeling is there than to grow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we need to wrap up with or tell people about?
No.
I don't think so.
Not that I know of.
Yeah. Reading a lot of great books. Matt and I are both reading Man's Search for Meaning. Allison, Matt, and I.
Yeah, that's probably why we've quoted Viktor Frankl so many times tonight. It's been a life-changing book.
Guys,
it's amazing.
Everyone needs to read this book. It's small and it's easy.
True.
It's like a mandatory top 5.
Yeah, I agree.
Without a doubt, hands down.
Go pick it up. I'm right.
I'm right. You're wrong.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.